My name is Lena Brooks, and this is the story of my grandfather's 81st birthday, the one almost no one showed up for. It was supposed to be small and simple, but it ended up changing the direction of our entire family. Sometimes the biggest turning points don't come with crowds or noise. Sometimes they happen in a quiet living room with a single cake and one pair of trembling hands. My grandfather, Walter Brooks, lived in a modest house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood outside St. Paul. The kind of place where mailboxes leaned slightly and wind chimes told you when the breeze changed direction. While the rest of my family spent that night celebrating the grand opening of a trendy downtown lounge, I drove across town with a grocery store cake sliding on the passenger seat and a pack of candles in my pocket. When I walked in, Grandpa Walter was in his faded brown recliner, the one that had molded to his shape over the years. He looked smaller than I remembered, thinner wrists, slower movements, but when he saw me, his whole face lit up like I'd brought the party with me. "You came," he said softly, like it wasn't expected. "Of course I did," I told him, setting the cake on the table. "You're not getting older without witnesses." He laughed, but it turned into a cough halfway through. On the side table sat 2 orange prescription bottles and a weekly pill organizer. Full compartments. Missed doses. I noticed, but didn't say anything yet. I texted my father once more. "We're about to cut the cake. You coming?" No reply. I tried calling my stepmother, Renee. Loud music blasted through the phone before she even said hello. "We're at the launch party," she shouted over the noise. "It's packed." "It's Grandpa's birthday," I reminded her. "Oh, Lena, he's not feeling great anyway, right? We'll visit later this week. Relax and have cake for us." Then my stepbrother Kyle yelled something about free drinks, and the call disconnected. Just like that, decision made, priorities shown. I slid my phone into my pocket and turned back to the living room with a smile I didn't feel. We lit the candles together. 8 and 1. His hands shook when he held the knife, so I steadied it with mine and we cut the first slice as a team. No singing crowd. No photos. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the ticking wall clock. "Best birthday I've had in a while," he said. I knew that couldn't possibly be true, which made it hurt more. We talked while he ate slowly. Old stories. Old neighbors. The hardware store he used to manage. He never once asked where the others were. Not directly. Some people protect themselves by not asking questions they already know the answer to. Before I left, he held my hand a little longer than usual. "You always show up," he told me. "Don't ever think that goes unnoticed." I drove home with that sentence echoing in my head. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. Photos from the lounge opening were everywhere, my dad, Renee, Kyle, and Aunt Marjorie posing under neon lights, arms around each other, glasses raised high. Captions about family night and perfect memories. Dozens of comments. Laughing emojis. Heart reactions. Not one mention of my grandfather. Not one. I stared at the screen until the images blurred. It wasn't new, being the afterthought. When I turned 16, my birthday dinner got replaced by Kyle's last-minute concert tickets. When I needed help with college forms, I was told to Google it. Grandpa was always the one who showed up instead, with advice, with rides, with quiet support. But this felt different. This felt final. I grabbed my keys and drove straight back to his house without calling first. 20 minutes through gray morning streets. Something in my chest wouldn't settle. He was at the kitchen table when I arrived, sorting mail into careful little stacks. One envelope had a red stamp across it, past due. He tried to slide it under another paper when he saw me notice. "Morning visit?" he asked gently. Yeah, I said, pulling out a chair. And I'm not going anywhere. He smiled, relieved, not surprised. That was the morning everything quietly began to shift, though none of them knew it yet. That morning, the house felt colder than it should have. Not just the temperature, the kind of cold that comes from silence and unpaid bills and too many empty chairs at important moments. I made tea while Grandpa Walter kept sorting envelopes, pretending everything in the red-stamped pile was unimportant junk. I reached over and gently pulled one free. Electric notice. Second warning. Grandpa, I said quietly, why didn't you tell anyone? He gave a small shrug. Didn't want to be a bother. That sentence hit me harder than it should have. A man who helped half the family stand on their feet was now worried about being a bother. I skipped my morning classes and stayed. I filled his pill organizer correctly this time. 3 compartments had been missed entirely. He admitted the prescriptions were getting expensive, so he'd been spacing them out. Doctor stretches things all the time, he joked weakly. I didn't laugh. From that day on, I started coming over 3 or 4 times a week. Then almost daily. I cooked soups that were easy on his stomach. Fixed the loose porch rail. Adjusted the thermostat he kept turning down to save money. Little things, but little things are what keep a life standing. The more time I spent there, the more I noticed what wasn't being said. No calls from my dad. No drop-ins from Aunt Marjorie. No just checking on you messages. Only silence. One afternoon, while I folded laundry on the couch, Grandpa watched me with a thoughtful expression, the kind that meant he'd been thinking for a while. You know, he said slowly, you're the only one who comes without being asked. I kept folding. I shouldn't have to be asked. He nodded like that confirmed something for him. Then he said, almost to himself, I need to get my papers in order. I looked up. What papers? My will. Accounts. The house. Things like that. He tapped the armrest. Time doesn't send reminders before it runs out. My chest tightened. Okay. Then we'll do it properly. He studied me for a moment. We? Yes. We. He gave a small, grateful smile, the kind that carried trust inside it. That evening, after he fell asleep in the recliner, I checked the hallway cabinet he once mentioned, the drawer with the labeled folders. Everything was organized in his careful handwriting. Old school neat. I wasn't snooping for advantage. I was looking for clarity. What I found made me sit back on my heels. There was a folder labeled Mark, business loan, my father. Inside were documents showing Grandpa had lent him $60,000 nearly a decade ago to start his contracting company. There were repayment schedules, mostly blank. A few partial checks recorded. Then nothing. A note in the margin, don't pressure him, he's trying. Another folder, Marjorie, repairs, showed roof replacement invoices, storm damage coverage gaps, and Grandpa's personal checks totaling over $30,000. There were medical co-pays he'd covered for them. Car repairs. Emergency transfers. Quiet rescues no one talked about publicly. I carried a few folders back to the living room when he woke. You helped them a lot, I said gently. They were my kids, he answered simply. That's the job. Do they know how tight things are for you now? He smiled without humor. People rarely look backward at the bridge once they've crossed it. That stayed with me. Grandpa, I said, choosing my words carefully, let's talk to a lawyer. Update everything. Make sure it says exactly what you want, not what anyone assumes. He didn't hesitate long. That surprised me most. Yes, he said. Call Mr. Adler. I used him years ago. Right there at the kitchen table, I made the appointment. While I spoke on the phone, he watched me with a calm, settled expression, like a man who had finally decided to stop postponing an important truth. When I hung up, he reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I see more than you think, he told me. About you. About them. About all of it. I didn't ask what he meant. Some answers were clearly on their way already. The lawyer's office sat on the third floor of a quiet brick building downtown, polished floors, muted lamps, the kind of place where voices automatically lower themselves. Grandpa Walter wore his gray coat and the old watch he only used for important days. He insisted on that detail. Said decisions should be dressed properly. Mr. Daniel Adler greeted him like an old client, not a forgotten one. Firm handshake. Direct eye contact. No rush in his tone. That alone seemed to relax Grandpa. We sat at a long table while files were opened and his previous will was placed between us. It was outdated, written back when everyone still visited, back when family meant proximity, not convenience. Mr. Adler adjusted his glasses. Tell me what changes you want, Walter. Grandpa didn't look at me when he answered. He looked straight at the lawyer. I want a protected trust, he said calmly. House. Savings. Investment account. Everything remaining. I want it secured and directed to one person. Mr. Adler nodded. Who? Lena Brooks. I felt my breath pause, not from surprise, but from the weight of hearing it spoken out loud. The lawyer wrote for a moment, then looked up. Your children will be excluded under that structure. Completely. Are you certain? Yes, Grandpa said, steady, clear, unmistakable. No partial shares? No conditional distribution? No. Mr. Adler leaned back slightly, not judgmental, just thorough. An irrevocable trust is difficult to reverse once funded. Challenges become unlikely to succeed. It sends a strong legal message. That's the point, Grandpa replied. The room went quiet for a beat. Then the lawyer continued, professional, methodical, explaining funding transfers, title changes, beneficiary locks, contest resistance language. Grandpa listened to every word. Asked precise questions. He wasn't confused. He wasn't pressured. He was resolved. We reviewed assets line by line. The house. His remaining accounts. A small but solid portfolio he built slowly over decades. He signed each preliminary directive with careful strokes, slower than years ago, but firm. When we finished, Mr. Adler said, I'll prepare the final documents. Once executed and recorded, it will be airtight. Grandpa nodded once. Good. In the elevator down, he seemed lighter, not happy exactly, but settled. Like a man who had straightened a crooked frame. I should have done that sooner, he said. Why didn't you? I asked. Hope, he answered simply. Hope makes people delay clarity. The next weeks were peaceful. I kept my routine with him, groceries, meals, walks when weather allowed. He talked more about the past than the present now. Old fishing trips. The first car he rebuilt. My grandmother's terrible cinnamon bread that he claimed to love anyway. The trust packet arrived by courier, thick, stamped, official. We reviewed it together at the kitchen table. He read every page. Asked for nothing changed. Signed where indicated. It was done. I drove the originals back to Mr. Adler for filing and recording. Legal transfers began immediately. Then, as required, the notifications went out. Not details. Just formal notice, estate plan updated, beneficiary status changed. 4 days later, the calls started. My father first. 3 missed calls in an hour. Then a voicemail, tight voice, forced calm. Lena, call me. We received something strange from a lawyer. Renee texted next. This better be a misunderstanding. Aunt Marjorie sent a paragraph about family unity and confusion. None of them asked how Grandpa was feeling. Only why they were removed. I showed Grandpa the messages. He read them without reaction and handed the phone back. They're not worried about me, he said quietly. They're worried about losing something. Saturday afternoon, the doorbell rang. Multiple cars outside. Doors slamming. Fast footsteps. I looked through the curtain, my father, Renee, Kyle, and Aunt Marjorie walking up together with the same expression people wear when they believe something belongs to them. I opened the door before they could knock again. They walked in without waiting to be invited. Dad spoke first. We got the notice. What is going on? Grandpa stayed seated in his recliner, hands folded, eyes clear. Sit, he said calmly. I'll explain. No one sat. The air felt tight, like a storm deciding where to break. And I knew, whatever happened next, there was no going back to how things used to pretend to be. No one sat down. That told me everything before a single argument started. People who come to understand take seats. People who come to claim stand up. My father kept his coat on like this was a business stop, not his own father's living room. Renee's arms were folded tight. Aunt Marjorie scanned the room like she was inspecting property already lost. Kyle hovered near the doorway, uncomfortable but silent. Dad spoke again, sharper this time. We received a legal notice saying we're no longer beneficiaries. That has to be a mistake. It isn't, Grandpa Walter said calmly. Renee stepped forward. You can't just erase your children. Grandpa looked at her, not angry, not emotional, just steady. I didn't erase anyone. I updated my decisions. Dad exhaled hard through his nose. Based on what? One conversation? One emotional moment? I answered before Grandpa had to. Based on years. 4 heads turned toward me at once. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Truth carries volume on its own. Based on who shows up and who doesn't, I continued. Who calls when they need money and who comes when he needs help standing up? Renee scoffed. Oh, please. Don't dramatize this. I met her eyes. His 81st birthday, you called it just an old man's day while you were drinking under neon lights. Kyle shifted. Dad looked annoyed, not guilty, annoyed. It was one night, he snapped. It was a pattern, I said. Aunt Marjorie cut in. Families get busy. Adults have lives. I nodded. Yes. But somehow those busy lives always had time to accept his checks. Silence, sharp and instant. I walked to the side table and picked up the copied folders I had organized weeks earlier. I didn't slam them. I placed them down. Business loan, $60,000, I said, looking at Dad. Never repaid. He opened his mouth, closed it. Roof replacement, $31,000, I said to Marjorie. Covered in full. Her jaw tightened. Medical co-pays. car repairs, mortgage gaps, quiet transfers. I tapped the papers. He showed up for all of you. Repeatedly. Dad rubbed his temple. He offered that help. Yes, I agreed. And you accepted it. That part counts too. Renee's voice rose. This is manipulation. You've been poisoning him against us. Grandpa spoke then, not loud, but final. No one poisoned me, he said. I have eyes. The room stilled. I waited, he continued. I made excuses for all of you. Work schedules. Traffic. Stress. But absence repeated becomes truth. Dad's tone shifted, softer, strategic. We can fix this. We'll visit more. Bring him to stay with us sometimes. Grandpa shook his head slowly. You're offering time now because money left. No one denied it, they tried to talk around it. Kyle finally spoke, barely above a mumble. We're still family. Grandpa nodded gently. Family is action, not title. That one landed. You could feel it. Renee threw her hands up. This is going to create resentment you can't undo. Grandpa answered, resentment grows where neglect was planted. Dad looked directly at him. You're really going through with this? I already did, Grandpa replied. No anger. No triumph. Just closure. No one apologized for the birthday. Not one of them said we should have been here. Not one asked how he was sleeping, eating, managing medication. Their questions were all legal, not human. That told the whole story without help from me. They left the way disappointed investors leave a failed deal, fast steps, tight faces, no backward glance. The house went quiet again. I expected Grandpa to be shaken. Instead, he leaned back and released a slow breath. Hard conversations, he said, are expensive, but cheaper than lifelong denial. I sat beside him and took his hand. You okay? I asked. He gave a small smile. Better than okay. Clear. Outside, their cars pulled away one by one. Inside, for the first time in years, there was no pretending left in the room. Only truth. And truth, once spoken fully, doesn't move backward. After that Saturday, something invisible but permanent settled over everything, like dust after a collapse. No more pretending. No more will come by soon promises. Just reality showing its actual shape. The consequences started quietly. My father listed the lake cabin first. I saw it online before anyone mentioned it, staged photos, bright filters, captions about rare opportunity. He told Grandpa on a short phone call that rising expenses forced the sale. But we both knew the truth. Grandpa had been covering the property taxes and seasonal maintenance for years. Without that support, the cabin wasn't sentimental anymore, it was a cost. Grandpa listened without interrupting, wished him luck, and ended the call gently. He never brought it up again. Aunt Marjorie's situation unraveled next. She'd been balancing late mortgage payments with what she used to call temporary help. That help had been Grandpa. When it stopped, the bank notices didn't. I heard about her foreclosure through a neighbor, not her. Not once did she call to explain or apologize or even check on him. Kyle sent exactly one message. I'll visit next weekend. For real this time. He didn't come. Not that weekend. Not any weekend after. Meanwhile, my days found a steady rhythm beside Grandpa Walter. I started arriving early mornings before my remote work started. Coffee first, black, strong. Then pills, correctly sorted. Breakfast simple and warm. Oatmeal, eggs, toast when he felt ambitious. We developed small rituals. Window open for 5 minutes no matter the weather. News headlines read out loud. A slow walk to the porch when his legs allowed it. Routine became medicine, for both of us. He didn't complain about the others. Not once. That surprised me most. No bitterness speeches. No scorekeeping. Just acceptance. One afternoon while we watched birds at the feeder, he said quietly, "Peace is cheaper than resentment." That's why I chose it. His health declined gradually, not dramatic, just steady. Medication adjustments. More doctor visits. Longer naps. I moved essentials closer to his chair. Installed brighter bulbs. Labeled drawers. Prepared without announcing I was preparing. Some evenings he asked for old stories to be retold, not because he forgot them, but because memory is a comfort loop. I learned that. "Tell me about the hardware store snowstorm," he'd say. Or, "Tell me the joke I told the inspector." And I would. Winter deepened. One night his breathing sounded different, thinner, like air moving through paper. The doctor was honest the next morning. Time is shortening. I packed a small bag and moved into the guest room that same day. Those final weeks were strangely gentle. No chaos. No last-minute family rush. Just quiet care. I read to him when his eyes tired. Played his favorite old radio station softly. Held his hand during the long wakeful nights. One evening he squeezed my fingers and said, barely above a whisper, "You gave me dignity at the end." That's the rarest gift. I couldn't answer without breaking, so I nodded and held on tighter. He passed early on a clear morning. No struggle. No alarm. Just stillness where breath used to be. Sunlight touched the arm of his recliner. The house did not feel haunted, it felt completed. I handled everything. Small chapel service. A handful of neighbors who actually knew him. No dramatic eulogies, just honest ones. Presence, not performance. My father and the others did attend, sat in the back, left quickly. Grief was not what they brought with them, discomfort was. Weeks later, while organizing documents, I found an envelope tucked inside his instruction folder. My name written in his careful print. Inside was a single handwritten page. "Lena, you never tried to own my time. You shared yours. That's why what remains is yours. Don't defend this decision. Live it. Grandpa." I read it twice at the kitchen table where we used to sit every morning. The tears that came weren't heavy. They were clean. And for the first time since that quiet birthday, I understood fully, this was never about money. It was about witness. Ownership transferred quietly, no dramatic moment, no ceremony, just official letters, recorded deeds, and updated account titles. The house became legally mine. What remained of the savings moved into the trust structure exactly as Grandpa Walter designed it. I didn't celebrate. I sat with it first. Grief and gratitude can live in the same chair. I learned that. For a while, I changed nothing. His mug stayed by the sink. His radio stayed tuned to the same station. Not out of denial, out of respect for the rhythm that had held us together. Then slowly, I began making the place breathe again. I repaired the porch steps he kept meaning to fix. Sanded, sealed, painted. I cleared the garden beds, the ones we used to check every morning, and planted herbs and tomatoes like he taught me. Working the soil felt like continuing a sentence he had started. Spring came early that year. Shoots pushed through faster than expected. I worked from home, taking on more design contracts, structuring my days the way our caregiving schedule used to run: morning routine, midday walk, evening quiet. Grief didn't interrupt life, it reshaped it. Messages from my father continued for a while. We should talk. This division isn't healthy. Families work things out. Renee called once and left a tight voicemail about fairness. Aunt Marjorie sent a long email about forgiveness and shared history. None of them mentioned missed birthdays. Or unpaid loans. Or empty chairs. I didn't reply. Not from anger, from clarity. Silence is not always punishment. Sometimes it's alignment. Months passed. The house stopped feeling like something I inherited and started feeling like somewhere I belonged. Neighbors waved when I watered the front beds. The mail carrier learned my name. Ordinary anchors formed. One light snowfall morning, almost exactly a year after that birthday, I stepped into the garden with a watering can out of pure habit. Snow dusted the rose bush Grandpa planted years ago. I brushed it gently aside and poured water at the base, even though logic said it didn't need it. Care isn't always about need. Sometimes it's about continuity. Standing there, I finally put the whole story into one sentence. Family is proven by presence, not position. Not titles. Not photos. Not captions under neon lights. Presence. Who comes when it's quiet? Who stays when it's inconvenient? Who answers when there's nothing to gain? Grandpa didn't reward me for being related to him. He recognized me for being there. That difference changed how I see everything now: friendships, love, loyalty, even success. People think inheritance stories are about wealth transfers. They're wrong. They're about value recognition. I kept his handwritten note in my desk drawer, but I memorized the line that mattered most: don't defend this decision. Live it. And I have. Without speeches. Without revenge. Just by building a steady, honest life inside the gift of being trusted. Sometimes listeners ask what happened to the rest of the family afterward. The real answer is simple: distance revealed truth. Without financial gravity pulling everyone together, relationships showed their natural orbit. And that's okay. Not every separation is tragedy. Some are corrections. If you're hearing this story now, here's what I want you to take with you. Show up early. Stay a little longer. Make the call. Bring the cake. Sit in the quiet rooms. Hold the shaking hands. Ordinary presence becomes extraordinary memory faster than you think. Time is the only inheritance no lawyer can rewrite. And once it's gone, no apology, no money, no regret can buy back a single hour. That was my grandfather's last lesson to me. And I'm still living it.